Good evening, everybody. Hey, Kim. Hey, Martin. Hey, Karen and Timothy and Heather. Evening all around. Hey, Scott. Hey, Phoenix and Karen and showing over on YouTube.
Let's dance, and that's no idle invitation, ladies and gentlemen, because
hey, Natalie. Hey, Tom. Hey, Larry.
Responsibilities very seriously in purveying good music to the dancing public. And now,
hey, Nipur and Paula.
Benny Goodman of Jingle Bells.
Hey, Gail. Hey, Gregory. Hey, Jay. Evening, Becky and Deanna. I don't know why I'm so stressed out tonight. Possibly because I so rarely actually do this presentation. Hey, Casey. Hey, Betsy. Hey, Jennifer. Evening, Casey. Batmobile broke its wheel and the Joker got away. Hey, Christy and Tracy and Carla, Renee and Carol. Been warm in Chicago here, too. Hey, Lynn. Clean up all the junk over on this side of the room. It's a little more presentable. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Dina. Hey, Louina. Hey, Maureen in Huntsville. Hey, Dad. Hey, Ellen. Hey, Jordana. Hey, Jean. Look who else is here. Hey, Karen. Hey, Susan. I hear Murder Maps looks like a really good book. I haven't actually seen a copy of it yet. Hey, Donna. Hey, Rose. Erev Tov, Lisa. Mashlamech. Adbaster. Hey, Becky. Hey, Bridget and Dana and Audrey. And Miles has been all climbing up on me. He hates it when I work at my desk. Betsy, yeah, I got a haircut about a week ago. Wheel broke its wheel and the Joker took ballet. Hey, Bruce. Honesty, got it. I'll try to remember that over on YouTube. Lynn, I had some side effects yesterday. I felt like I was kind of exhausted and achy yesterday. But today I woke up feeling like I could wrestle Jim Jordan and fold his ass into some sort of brochure.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Hey, Maria.
Room of the Congress Hotel in
Hey, Alexandra.
And now Benny Goodman playing Where Am I?
I know it's lavishly illustrated. I have seen the PDF. Phoenix, I don't know. Where are any of us? Oh, thanks, Paula. My voice is in okay shape. I was recording demos for a couple of weeks there. I don't think I'm going to do anything with them, but, you know, just to give me a project. I don't know what to do when all of my books are done. Hey, Jen. I have seen a picture of the book edges painted in red there. That is badass. I didn't know they were making the book that good, honestly. I might not have forgotten that I wrote it. Or not been so quick to just brush it off as some other project. Hey, Emily. Hey, Maureen. Hey, Lindsay. Now I'm hoping they'll do my next one. Hey, Diane. Hey, Ann. Evening Danger Diaz in Houston. The different episode of the Benny Goodman at Live at the Congress Hotel show. Miles. Hey, Karen in New Mexico. Hey, Melissa and Mars. Hey, April and Heather. Hey, Doris. Oh, Gary, I had a great time in D.C. The whole 25 or so hours that I was there. Hey, Georgia. Hey, Ann. I would love to do a Rose Hill book. I don't know if Rose Hill would love me to do a Rose Hill book. It's also such a much larger cemetery. Rose Hill still, at the moment, just knows me as that guy who dances on the graves, and other things that they're being told about me have little basis in fact. That is exactly right. Dad, where's the toy? Where's the toy? After Daddy's done talking, Miles. You showing how good you can stand? Okay, please don't knock over my bourbon. Hey, Luann. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Dave and Barb.
An unforgettable Irving Berlin tune, You Forgot to Remember.
I don't know if the Catholic ones would really like me doing it either. We'll see. One thing that helped a lot with Graceland was having access to their archives and their records. Yeah, the best hope I can do is somebody will get really jealous of the Graceland book. Lee, congrats on the negative test. Hey, Debbie and Bob. And Gary, we did find a grave at Arlington a week ago. Since I was going to be in the air. Hey, Dana, hope you're doing better. Hey, Mike and Beverly. I'm awfully nervous about this one tonight. I don't know why. Maybe because I haven't done it in so long. I know the story really well, but I can't remember all of what's in, how I set this thing up a year and a half ago. I just went through and realized, oh, it just doesn't have the right overlays. It doesn't have any of the right graphics. Oh, Miles is definitely stealing some spotlight today. Aren't you, Miles? Ah, thanks, Ann. Hey, Connie. Cardinella is an allogram of Dalians. Interesting. In some records, he's just known as Sam Cardinal. I haven't really checked whether Cardinella is in fact Italian for cardinal. Hey, welcome, Georgie. Hey, Lynn. Hey, Lisa. We'll give Benny a couple more minutes here. People tend to log on right at 8 o'clock, so I'll go in a few more minutes. Miles, I'm going to be needing both of my hands here in a minute, so. I'm going to get you down here, okay? He's going to come right back up. Yep, he's already back up.
And now here is the guest series songs of the program. Joe Harris presents presenting that immortal opus, The Music Goes Around and Around.
All right, we're going to let Benny Goodman do one more song here. As Miles continues to roam the desk. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Kristen. Audrey, right you are. I usually try not to be intrusive when I'm asking for attention so much, though. Thanks, Eddie. Welcome along. You see him stand up there. Hey, Kyle. Hey, Amy and Raleigh. Kathy, this is Benny Goodman at the Congress Hotel. Playing in the background right now. Hey, Debbie. Evening, Debbie. Hey, MJ. In Facebook jail. Easy enough to get in there these days. Speaking of, you'll definitely want to tune into Whiskey and a Cookie tomorrow night. There's so many people to call. You got multiple Congress creatures posing with firearms with their family. Cowboy's gone. You got a guy saying that you can cure COVID by gargling Listerine. I got a lot of phone calls to make. We're going to have a lot of fun. We'll let Benny Goodman finish off this song. Hey, Donna in Houston. A couple of people from Houston out there. Who is in the graphics? This is Sam Cartanella of the Cardinella Gang. I'm a retelling of it in the 50s, I believe.
National Broadcasting Company is presenting the music of Benny Goodman.
Gary, I'm glad to hear that.
From the Joseph Urban Room
All right.
Hotel in Chicago.
From the Joseph Urban Room, the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago, that was Benny Goodman and his orchestra, which means he's got at a stopping point. That means it is time for me to get to a starting point. Welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time, so I am, incredibly famous, and you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. Among my books are Mysterious Chicago, the book. Really ought to put out like Mysterious Chicago, the flamethrower while I'm at it. H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, Ghosts of Chicago, now a rare collector's item. Murder Maps USA, brand new, shipping this week, just got written up in the New York Times, which calls it a veritable cornucopia, which is great because I'd hate to be an alleged cornucopia. How would I face my parents? And coming in July, Graceland Cemetery. July, last I heard, but it keeps on getting kicked back another few weeks at a time. Coming from University of Illinois Press, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. The board's not going to like that secrets part in there, but oh well. Boards of directors never seem to like me very much. Anyway, today we are doing a presentation that I've only done once before, and it was way back in May of last year, about a year and a half ago now. Hi, Mom and Grandma. This is all about the Sam Cartanella Gang. This is one of the very little-known stories in Chicago gangland history. It all took place just before Prohibition, before all of that stuff, before the gangs in Chicago really took off. These guys aren't really connected to Capone or any of those guys, so they never really became famous. I've been trying to get a book about these guys off of the ground for many years now, but it's one of these things where if the publisher wasn't really pushing it, it would just be a whole lot of work for basically no payoff. So, in any case, we will tell the story right here of the strange tale of the Cardinella Gang. To start out with, we're going to talk a little bit about newspaper reporter Ben Hecht. Now, in the 1950s, Ben Hecht claimed that he invented the ways that gangsters talk. Like this quote of Nicholas the choir singer Viana, who said he was a tough kid, right? Afraid of nothing, see? Now, later on, in the 1950s, reporters were claiming that they made all of this stuff up. All the whole thing about gangsters talking like this, see? I'm the real leader around here, right? I'm the real around here. The whole Edgar G. Robinson thing. But in the 1950s, reporters were basically taking credit for the world being round. There was a real bull market for reporter memoirs in the 1950s in which they claimed to have made up practically everything that ever happened. If they had gotten together and say, we made that whole Titanic thing up, there was never even any such ship, it wouldn't have been true, but it would have been entirely on brand. It's a very difficult thing when analyzing old newspaper stories is trying to figure out who's telling the truth, and were they telling the truth in the 20s, or were they telling the truth in the 1950s? Sometimes it's a little bit of both, but not enough of either. You can usually kind of triangulate if you're gonna. Most cities had several papers, so you can kind of put the pieces together. But the guy he was quoting right there was Nicholas the choir singer Viana. They call him the choir singer because he said that he was on his way to a choir practice the day that he walked into Sam Cartanella's pool hall. A week later, he committed his first murder. In November of 1920, there was a big meeting at the Blackstone Hotel where people such as Jane Addams of Hull House made a plea to commute his sentence to life in prison. He had been sentenced to the death penalty for murder. They were planning to hang him on his 19th birthday. But they argue that the real criminal was probably his boss in the gang, Sam Cartanella, who was also awaiting hanging at the time. So there was a whole lot of, I don't know exactly what went on in the meeting. I've got some transcripts of it. I've got some reports on it. It wasn't widely reported in the press at the time. All the notes from it are in shorthand. And I've yet to find anybody who's really been able to decipher what kind of shorthand they were using here. But Governor Loudon decided that no, he was not going to be commuting the sentence, and Nicholas the choir singer Viana was going to be executed for murder. He had committed several of them in his 18 years, and at the last day, he decided to write out a confession. And this one, he wrote down everything that had happened and said, I was only a boy when I went to Cardinella's place, who is 40, and he got me. Now, there's an interesting line in this. He says, pool's all right, but I don't recommend going into pool halls. It always leads to worse things. Next thing you know, you're going to be rebuckling your knickerbockers below the knee, using words like swell, and so's your old man. And listening to some big out-of-town Jasper here to tell you all about horse race gambling. But he was still a singer. I don't think anybody ever really checked that he was actually in the choir at the church. But he was known as a very good singer. He sang Miserere on his way to what was called the death cell. There was a lot of talk about whether he was going to sing on the scaffold, which he didn't end up doing in the end. He sang, as they marched him through, they sang Miserere. I think that's how it goes. There's a few different songs called that. And when his mother came to visit him in the cell the night before his execution, which was also his 19th birthday, he sang Mother O' Mine, which has a whole verse about, if they hanged me from the highest hill, I would still know that Mother O' Mine loves me. Rather maudlin. There aren't a lot of really good pictures of Nicholas the choir singer Viana. This is about as clear as they come right here. There were those who doubted of the prosecution that he was really only a teenager. At one point, the lawyer tried to get the judge to order him to stop shaving for a couple of days, just to make himself look older. Kind of leading the jury there. But he was saying in 1920, 4 months later, his boss, Sam Cartanella, was too, and inspired this short story by Ernest Hemingway. They hanged Sam Cartanella at 6 o'clock in the morning in the corridor of the county jail. The corridor was high and narrow with tiers of cells on either side. All cells were occupied. The prisoners had been brought in for the hanging. 5 men sentenced to be hanged were in the 5 top cells. 3 of the men to be hanged were Negroes. They were very frightened. One of the white men sat on his cot with his head in his hands. The other lay flat on his cot with a blanket wrapped around his head. Very Hemingway-style writing. Building up to the fact that Sam Cartanella, on the way, lost control of his bowels and had to be tied to a chair and hanged tied to the chair. This is the main thing that people remembered about it in the weeks that followed initially. But things got a little bit weirder after that. So before we really get into Sam Cartanella, we got to talk about kind of where gangland was at the time. Throughout the 1910s, before Prohibition got started, what people mostly worried about was the Black Hand. which was not really a gang in and of itself. It was more an extortion technique. It was a term used by several different gangs. In those days, in the 1910s and the early 20th century, especially if an Italian person bought a piece of property, he could probably expect to get a letter saying, "Congratulations on the purchase of your new property. Please leave $300 in an envelope at this undisclosed location, or we will blow your building up. Sincerely, the Black Hand." And they, in fact, did blow up quite a number of buildings, particularly in the neighborhood that was known as Little Hell, which is roughly the Halstead and Division vicinity. Now, what we're talking about here, these were about 8 kids, all of them roughly teenage, who had started committing petty crimes and holdups and maybe a little bit of Black Hand work back in the days of about 1918. While everybody else was worrying about influenza, they were going around robbing people and occasionally killing them. But the story tends to revolve primarily around the day they were working under a guy named Sam Cartanella, known around the neighborhood as Il Diavolo, the devil. Now, Cardinella operated a pool room, and it's almost like he had read Oliver Twist and thought that it was a how-to manual. According to the stories that came out later, he would lure kids into this pool hall, then kind of convince them that he had supernatural powers over them, and then send them off to commit crimes. He would teach them how to commit holdups, how to commit burglaries, send them off on the errands, take a share of the money for himself, and then cheat them out of the rest using loaded dice. By the time the police caught up with these guys, they confessed to somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 holdups by some accounts. Other accounts say it was more like 60. It's probably a little closer to 60. But the pool hall still appears to be standing right about here, down in what is now Chinatown on 22nd Place. Now, no two articles about this seem to give the same exact address as to where it was, but as near as I can figure, it was probably right about in this building here on the middle, which, incidentally, if we turn down the road from that a little bit, just down the block was Viana's house, which is actually still standing. Move up here a little bit. Give me time to take a quick drink. Now, in those days, every criminal in the city knew which bars were right. One of the side gigs that a lot of bartenders had was holding criminals' guns for them. You didn't keep your own gun if you were a hold-up man. You had somebody holding it for you. Often that was a crooked bartender. Places like the Hub had been in operation for decades, where all the grave robbers and counterfeiters hung out over on Madison. That's come up on a few of our tours now. But this little greenhouse, obviously fixed up a little bit since 1919. But this was Nick Viana's house right down the block. Now, it kind of beggars imagination to me, the way that he said that I walked in there on my way to choir practice. The church was in the whole other direction from this. Well, that'll come up later on. But inside, it probably looked roughly like this on 22nd Place. Now, what eventually got them into the most trouble was in June of 1919, they killed a guy by the name of Andrew Bowman. They had met up in the pool hall. Sam Cartanella gave them all of their guns. Then they drove up to a place and it charged in. Well, first of all, a kid from the gang named Thomas Errico went in first. The rule was that he was going in kind of as a lookout. If there were any cops inside of the place, he was to walk back out. He would just kind of walk in and say, "I was thinking of playing some pool." "No, I don't think I will play some pool after all." But when he didn't come back out, that was the signal. Everybody knew that, okay, there are no cops in this place. We can bust right on in. So the kids busted in, started holding the place up. They robbed Thomas Errico while he was standing there just to make it all look a little bit more authentic, stole about $2,000 off of people, and ended up shooting somebody at the same time, a guy by the name of Andrew Bowman. They thought he was reaching for a gun. He was really reaching for his wallet, so they shot him. Viana shouted, what did you do that for, you son of a bitch?" That was overheard by several witnesses. As they drove away, several people found out what had happened. They had heard the gunshots from inside, took note of the license plate, which was traced to a guy by the name of Santo Orlando, who was then found dead a couple of days later. So this is all going down in the summer of 1919. Summer of 1919 was a very involved summer here in Chicago. For one thing, At the end of July, they closed down all of the saloons. Prohibition would not take place for about another 6 months or so, but as kind of to ease people into it, at the end of June they shut down all of the saloons. The 1st of July was known as the Thirsty First. This was the day that all of the saloons shut down. That same summer was also the wreck of the blimp, the Wingfoot Airship Express that crashed into the bank over at LaSalle and Jackson. Not to mention, just weeks after that was the horrible race riot down in the Bronzeville area that left dozens and dozens of people dead, which is really a whole other tour in and of itself. But right in the middle of this, all through what was then a Little Italy area and is now Chinatown, people were getting held up and mugged, their places were getting busted into, and it all seems to have been this one gang led by Sam Cartanella. Now, the word at the time was there was definitely a gang working, but nobody knew who the leader was. They just spoke of him as hushed tones as Il Diavolo. And then shortly thereafter, shortly after Santo Orlando disappeared, Errico busted into a place, along with Nicholas the Choir singer Viana. They busted into a barber shop that also had a couple of pool tables just as an added attraction. They saw a guy by the name of Kubalanza shoving money in his pocket. One of the other ones thought he was going for a gun, shot him, and ended up dying. This is what really got the police on these people's case. Between this and the Santo Orlando thing, they had picked up just about enough data about who these kids were and what was going on here. So, one day in November of 1919, 15 officers, led by Detective Sergeant John W. Norton, charged the place where the guys were hanging out. That's Norton over on the right. We've talked about him on several different tours. He comes up over and over on these things. He first made the news when he was the detective sergeant who was investigating the H.H. Holmes murder castle down on 63rd Street. And was with the force all through the 1930s. So the same guy who battled against H.H. Holmes was also battling against Al Capone. He's also one of very, very few cops of the era that was never seriously accused of corruption. Wasn't a perfect cop by any means, but by the standards of the day, he was excellent. He kind of has a Columbo vibe about him. A lot of the accounts of his interrogations of people, he'd say, "Oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Now, there's just one more thing that I don't understand," as he worked to catch them. Here's how he looked as of 1895 when he was going through the castle building. And in particular, he managed to get Errico talking. Errico was the one who said, "It wasn't us. We've all been under the control of this guy who runs a pool hall by the name of Sam Cartanella." So, once he confessed, the newspapers went nuts with this. They found that they had busted up one of the biggest gang raids in 20 years. They called him here the modern Fagin. I'm not the first person to imagine that he was very much like he had read Oliver Twist and thought it was a how-to manual or something. But they started talking about the murder clique, the crime shop, the college of crime, where these kids were being taught all of these strange techniques. This became quite a story for a while. At one point here, they admitted killing 4 and robbing 250. I would say, honestly, they had probably killed more people than that and probably robbed fewer, unless you count these raids where they just robbed everybody in the barber shop. That would probably take it up to about 250, but it probably wasn't 250 individual raids. Now, all of this happened. They all got arrested in November of 1919, which makes it just a little bit too early for them to be involved in the bootlegging thing. Now, at the time, these things were just getting started. Now, May of 1920, while all these guys were still in jail and awaiting their trials, Big Jim Colosimo was killed in May of 1920. You can see the banner headline on this. I had to stitch together two different pictures just to get this to work, just to get it to fit. Big Jim Colosimo was killed in his cafe. He had been the guy running most of the vice operations, but apparently didn't know about the Cardinella Gang. Everybody else who was running any kind of a black hand ring or a gambling operation or a brothel was probably making payments to Big Jim. But when Prohibition got started, he supposedly said, "I don't want to get involved in that. I just got married again. I'm trying to straighten up and fly right. We'll still have the brothels. We'll still have all of the gambling. But I don't think we should be doing bootleg liquor around here." He was shot to death in May of 1912. John Torrio and his young lieutenant Al Capone took over. So by the time these guys went on trial, they were already a complete anachronism. Gangs like that just went around doing holdups and stuff and robbing places. Like the Kubalanza killing, they each made about $6 off of that entire raid. That was just peanuts compared to what guys were going to be making with bootleg liquor in a couple of years. So they had already kind of outlived their lives by far by the time they were even arrested. But Errico and Viana had most of the time spent most of the time on trial. We've only been able to find a handful of pictures of these guys. The one on the left of Errico is the best one I have ever seen. Viana had the better sob stories, like, I was always such a good kid. I sang in the choir at the church, but I walked into Sam Cartanella's pool hall, and a week later he committed my first murder. I was terrified of him. He said that if we squawked or if we squealed, he'd have us all killed. We believed that he had hypnotized us. He had some kind of powers over us. And we can see that he was reasonably educated. He was actually able to sign his own statements, whereas with Sam Cartanella, it was just like a mark with an X. Now, I'll put out a few things from the pardon file here. Immediately, there was a lot of people going around saying, Sam Cartanella couldn't have really been the evil mastermind here. These kids have been committing crimes for months, years even. Sam Cartanella only opened his pool hall about 6 months before they were all arrested. Frankly, this is a very good argument. It doesn't really seem like Sam Cartanella had been quite the mastermind he is sometimes said to have been. As I mentioned before, that pool hall was right by Viana's house and not even in the right direction if he was on his way to church. I'm not sure anybody actually confirmed that he was ever even in the choir at all, and it was well known from the state's own evidence that they had been committing these crimes back when Sam Cartanella was just a guy running a fruit cart over on the corner. So the legal archives down in Springfield are an absolute treasure trove of information about this. This is just one of the clemency files. Those are the files that they put together when someone is going for a pardon. There tends to be tons and tons of paperwork here. And this puts spins on the story that I never would have gotten from the newspaper archives, never would have gotten from any of the true crime books of the 1930s that rehashed this story, any of the later rehashes like reminiscences from the coroner. There's a lot of stuff about this, but it was whole new angles when you really dug into this paperwork. So this is the pardon file. There were 2 of them. There was one for Cardinella, one for Viana, but several of the other guys also were mixed into Viana's. And it turned out that Mike Merlot was advocating really hard, especially on the case of Sam Cartanella, saying that he was really just being persecuted for being too Italian. Now, Mike Merlot was the head of the Unione Siciliana. Everybody was afraid to go against the Unione Siciliana. For the first 4 or 5 years of Prohibition, there weren't a lot of killings. Once John Torrio took over, he just said, okay, we're going to divide the city into territories. You take yours, we'll take ours. We're not going to fight. There's going to be plenty of money for everybody. Within a couple of years, he was kind of regretting that. He started wanting to take Dino Bandini, the head of the North Side, out, but Mike Merlot said no. The Unione Siciliana was a civic organization that by the mid-1920s was effectively a front for the mob. Whoever was in charge of that, you didn't go against them no matter what. But then Mike Merlot died of natural causes, and after that the gang war really took off. But he had been going around advocating, especially for Sam Cartanella, to at least get a commuted sentence of life in prison instead of the death penalty. Partly because he had never actually killed anyone himself, he was just apparently the mastermind, and it's highly doubtful that he was even really the mastermind. Now, among the things that he did was, within the pardon file are about 100 pages of petition. This petition just goes on and on and on of people who say that Sam Cartanella got a bad deal, should be either pardoned or at least given a commuted sentence. Going over all of these, I still haven't gone through all of them. You can tell by the dates, the addresses tend to be clustered around each other. They're not like all in a row like somebody would have gone door to door getting them, but they're kind of clustered. These were probably set out at neighborhood Unione Siciliana meetings, set out on a table someplace, and people would walk by and sign up. But among them are people like Frank R. Nitto. That's Frank the Enforcer Nitty inside of this place. There's also Tony D'Andrea has a signature in here. And that almost looks like Colosimo up there, but Big Jim would have been dead by this point. Also among them was, closest we can get to Sam Cartanella's signature, he was apparently illiterate, or at least pretending that he was illiterate. He claimed not to be able to speak any English at all, spoke only through an interpreter. So what we've got here is Sam Cartanella, his mark, with an X. Just signed with an X. Mixed in here as well, there's also a number of statements like this one. These are other prisoners who were imprisoned with the boys in the county jail. And after Cardinella was convicted and sentenced to die, quite a number of them made statements. Quite a number of people who'd just been in prison with them said that the kids had been talking. Now, the jail there had a very weird atmosphere. For the most part, the county jail was just people who were awaiting trial, but they also had murderers' row. And a couple of hours a day, they had recreation time where everybody would just kind of mingle and talk. And a couple of people, including Big Tim Murphy, who was shot a couple of blocks away from where I am right now eventually, said a lot of these guys were telling stories. They said, I don't know if I can do this. The feds want me to say it was all Sam Cartanella. They say that I can save my own neck if I just finger Sam Cartanella. How am I supposed to tell them that? That old simpleton doesn't even speak English. He's a fruit cart peddler, and I'm supposed to tell them that he was some kind of a criminal mastermind? That was the story anyway. So why, we might wonder, would they want to pin everything on Sam Cartanella when clearly the boys were acting of their own accord? Now, the number one thing, pool. As I mentioned, July of 1919, all of the saloons closed, and the police immediately said, it has not affected crime at all. When the saloons were closed at first, we had a falling off in crime reports, but I do not attribute this to the closing. The real criminal does not frequent the saloon, and the embryo criminal does not either. The saloon keeper would not harbor him. Dry pool rooms are the school of criminals. This is something the cops had been saying for a long time. They had it in their head that they could really make an example of Sam Cartanella and hold him up as exactly what they were talking about, that all the crime had just moved into pool rooms. This is one of the lawyers who worked on their behalf. This is the excerpt from Nicholas Viana's confession that was written for the Chicago Herald-Examiner. He said, it was all over when I went into Cardanella's pool room. I was looking for adventure. Everyone knows what happens when you go looking for that in a pool room. They ought to do away with them. Pool is all right, but it always leads to something else. I only hope they hang Cardinella so he can't go back to his joint and lead other young boys astray. Now, the odds that Nicholas Viana actually wrote this himself are really pretty low. More likely it would have been written almost entirely by a Herald Examiner reporter who just had Nicholas Viana give him the okay on it. But, as mentioned, Nicholas the choir singer Viana was hanged on his 19th birthday. His body was taken and put into a basket. And as they drove away, the people in the jail said, what do you know about that? And that was about it at the time. Meanwhile, Cardinella remained in the gang. And one of my favorite things that I've tried to look up more and more about is elsewhere here there was also a pardon file for Carl Wanderer. You've probably heard me talk about Carl Wanderer before if you come on these. He was the guy who came up to a drifter on Madison Street and said, hey, bud, you gotta help me out. I'm in the doghouse with my wife. She's about to have a baby, doesn't think I'm good enough to be a dad. So if you'll come pretend to mug us, I'll give you $10. And Wanderer ended up shooting the drifter to death and shooting his pregnant wife to death. He didn't want to be a dad. He wanted to get back into the army or something. So while in prison at the same time as Sam Cartanella, Wanderer organized a prison drill team in which people like Harry the Lone Wolf Ward and Sam Cartanella marched around with broomstick rifles doing drills. Eventually they all quit because they said that Carl Wanderer guy was just too insane. He was too much of a psycho even for people like Sam Cartanella. But, move ahead just a little bit. On the night before his planned execution in April of 1921, Sam Cartanella was visited by his entire family. His children were told that their father was going on a journey. Now, he spoke in such a thick Sicilian accent that even prison guards who were from Sicily couldn't really understand him very well, but they noticed that he had said the word Viana over and over again. And they all thought that that was very weird. Viana was the kid whose evidence between him and Errico had really gotten them in trouble. Errico had spoken enough that he managed to get his sentence commuted to life in prison. Viana hadn't said quite that much, so maybe he was praising him for not saying more than he had. But meanwhile, when Viana was on the scaffold, his last words were, "Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye to all but Sam Cartanella. May his soul be damned." But the next morning after this, Cardinella was led out to the gallows. This is how it looked at the time. They had this little sentry box set up, and behind it where supposedly the hangman was hiding out. The story was that nobody would know exactly who the hangman was. He would just do some kind of a mechanism inside. It was later said that there really wasn't anybody in there at all. The sheriff himself was doing all of the mechanisms. This was just kind of a decoy to take the pressure off of him. But Cardinella, according to the coroner, really freaked the other prison guards out. They would see him wandering back and forth in his cell like a spider, giving people evil glares. And these were guys who were used to seeing evil glares by then. But when they brought him out, all of his nerve just left him. He completely collapsed. I've never seen anything to confirm that he messed himself, as Ernest Hemingway wrote, but they did have to hang him while tied to a chair, which was the kind of thing that was occasionally known to happen in those days. So they brought him out here with the hood over his face and tied to a chair. And once again, after he died, they found that he was bringing him, they found that his friends were putting the body into a basket. Now, here is where I start to lose the plot on the idea that Cardinella was actually innocent the whole time and just a patsy getting stuff pinned on him. Now, we do have a few different things. People had tried to plot to smuggle some nitroglycerin into his cell so he could blow up the jail and make an escape. You have to be pretty well connected to have things like this. And this wasn't his first offense either. Shortly after the race riots, they arrested him saying that he had just been shooting out his window at anybody who was passing by. That might or may not have been true. They might have just got him even at the time just because he was sufficiently Italian. And in any case, he was eventually let off for that one. It didn't come up at all during his trial here, as far as I can tell. But when they brought the body out into a basket and took it to an ambulance instead of a hearse, this time people started saying, okay, let's find out what they're doing. So they walked inside of the ambulance, and there was a team of doctors trying to bring Sam Cartanella back to life. He had paced back and forth in the cell so he could lose enough weight. He had apparently faked the breakdown because he wanted to be tied to a chair. Having less weight and being tied to a chair meant less weight on the noose and less of a drop. The idea being that if his neck did not actually break, they might be able to bring him back to life. There was also people who were waiting around with a pulmotor and everything. The coroner's physician even later said if they hadn't caught them when they did, there's at least a slim chance that it might have actually worked. And it came out that the reason that Sam Cartanella had thought that it would work is they had at least told him that they'd already tested it on Nicholas the Choir Singer Viana and that it had actually worked. Now, Viana's body, we know, was taken to a funeral home right in the middle of where the University of Illinois at Chicago campus would be now. Now, it's kind of fun now reading as soon as this story broke, reporters busted in and started asking the guy a lot of questions. And of course, in those days, we didn't have just a morning paper. We had an evening paper, we had an afternoon paper, and they would publish several editions over the course of a day. It's kind of fun to put all of the articles in order in which the undertaker is interviewed. One of them says, "No, we never heard of anything like that." Then the next day they said, "Well, we admit that they asked us if we could bring Viana back to life, but we never could have pulled that off." And then they did ask us, and undoubtedly we would have had some success with it, but of course we didn't actually try. The sheriff was always convinced by what he had heard, like the word through the grapevine, was that several people had gathered up standing around Nicholas the Choir Singer Viana in the undertaking parlor, and a man with a pulmotor, kind of early versions of the paddles, where they go flatline, clear, flatline, clear, and managed to get him breathing again, managed to get him talking a little bit again. But then they stepped back and let him die because the whole thing was really just a ruse to make sure that it would actually work as well on Sam Cartanella. So exactly how true this was is exactly how connected the Cardinella must have been. This is probably the best evidence we got. That and his final statement. His final statement in his pardon file is something like, I remember when I first came to America and saw the magnificent Statue of Liberty, I believed that now, finally, in this new land of the free, I would be given liberty and equal opportunity. He just lays it on so thick. It's like, okay, you're coming on a little bit too strong there, Sam. Now, I do think that the police probably exaggerated the extent to which he was really the boss of all of these kids, but he knew what was going on, he was holding their guns for them, and he was apparently fairly well connected himself. Just to wrap things up, the building, as near as I can triangulate, is still standing down here on 22nd Place. Nicholas the choir singer Viana's house is still standing right down the road from there. So, at least according to legend, in 1919, this place would have been crawling with kids learning to commit crimes, and Sam Cartanella up there at the top, pulling all of the strings. So, all right, this one ran a little bit short today. But let me go ahead and plug the 2 upcoming tours. It seems only right to follow up this one about the 1919 criminals with one about the gangsters of Chicago from the 1920s and 30s. So that's what we will do on Sunday morning. I haven't done that one, I think, since June, other than one in-person tour. And then a week from today on Thursday, we're going to do Lakeview and Lincoln Park, updated a little bit to include the stuff from the stuff that we found just this week about Elias Purcell, who was killed in what they called the murder of 1,000 clues. And even going through all of the data, I can't get my head around the fact, was this a perfect murder or a perfect suicide that he successfully made look like a murder? So lots of good stuff coming up, and of course we got morning mini tours every day at 10 o'clock in the morning. Tomorrow night, Friday, on 6:30 on Fridays, on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page, we do a show called Whiskey and a Cookie, in which Patty and friends, including myself, drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. And I make prank phone calls to politicians that I feel deserve it. I've got quite a list to pick from this particular week. Also, should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, t-shirt, hoodie, etc., go to cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. And with that, we're going to put the Benny Goodman back on and just hang out a bit. Thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Take it away, Benny.
Orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And it is necessary to say, get happy.
Thanks for coming along, everybody. This one didn't run as long as I thought it was going to. Georgie, on Cafe Press, I couldn't find an ornament to add that I don't think that looked very good. There might be one on there. Speaking of ornaments, I don't know if Andrea's out there, but we got the Miles, Charlotte, and Priya ornaments. We love them. Kim, that's a tough question. I do love David Tennant as the Doctor. And I think Matt Smith was a very good Doctor who just had very bad episodes written for him. Hey, David. I'm currently drinking Jepson's aged in a cognac barrel. Now, Kelly, I think they probably would have had to. I very much doubt they could have really brought him, back to life. They might have been able to get his heart beating again. They'd run experiments like that in Chicago a couple of times. Or at least once in the 1880s. They pumped a whole bunch of electricity into a guy after they hanged him to see what would happen. They said they got his heart beating again, the color came back into his face, but his neck was broken. They were never going to really bring him back. Oh yeah, we'll definitely be doing the time travel pub crawl Drink Like a Dickens for the holidays sometime this month as well. That's definitely coming up. Well, George, the people in Flatliners had slightly better equipment than they would have had in 1921. Or 20 in Viana's case. And in both cases, their necks were broken, so... Thank you, Lisa. Becky, it depended on which pool hall it was. Women were legally allowed in them. Thanks, Gina. Yeah, Gary, what is now Chinatown was basically the Levee District a generation before it was Chinatown. But even in like the Capone days in the 20s, it was slowly starting to become Chinatown.
And they loved it, they loved it. You could never enjoy being blue until you hear Benny Goodman play the bass.
That's quite right, Leah. Stay away from those pool halls. One fine night, you'll leave the pool hall, heading for the dance at the Armory. Libertine men in scarlet women and ragtime. Shameless music that'll grab your son, your daughter, with the arms of a jungle animal instinct. Mass hysteria. Friends, the idle brain is a devil's playground. Trouble. Stephen, I'm not sure when Frank Nitti showed up. But by the time this all happened, Capone was in town. Audrey, yeah, well, it'll probably be the same drinks as last year. Oh, I hadn't heard Russell T. Davies was coming back as showrunner. Excellent. Stephen Moffat is a great idea, man, but it turned out he really needed Russell T. Davies to iron out his ideas for him. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I've been trying to get a book about this stuff going on for quite a while, especially because you got Carl Wanderer was there too. Terrible Tommy O'Connor was operating the same time. Never quite got it off of the ground, though. David, I am drinking the bourbon that you got me. How old was I when my first book was published? 26. I don't know. I've had a whole proposal written for a book about this stuff for years, but nobody was ever that interested in it. It's not a famous enough story. So I'd have to have a publisher be behind it enough to market it enough to make it famous. Or I could write it like Devil in the White City style, where I do it as a novel and pretend it's a nonfiction. That might work. Yeah, I'm drinking a little more than usual tonight. It was a stressful day. Nice, Kelly. Screenplay is one option with it, too. But it'd have to be a fairly big budget just to do something historical like that. And remind me, and I will. Yeah, this story is a little too regional for people. No, the guy who wrote the movie Little Caesar, which famously had, "Is this the end of Caesar?" Said that it was based on Sam Cartanella. He said that specifically, but really the stories are so dissimilar. See you, Lisa. Gotta figure out where to go to find a grave tomorrow, too. Everything's stacking up, and I gotta go to Georgia in like a week and a half. Lauren, I saw some reference to Cardinella Viana having a clemency file in some book. So I went down to Springfield, and turned out there was a lot of good stuff. Carl Wanderer's clemency file is huge. It's got like the whole trial in there. So I got quite a lot of stuff out of there. The place is a treasure trove. It's a long drive, but it's a treasure trove. Georgia, my family's in Georgia. But Becky, it was very, very loose. He said that it was loosely inspired by Sam Cartanella, the Little Caesar movie. But even that one's not really famous enough that a book about what it's based on. Probably wouldn't be an easy sell. Georgia, there's basically a transcript of the Carl Wanderer trial. Good night, Betsy. Ooh, a review of Murder Maps just came in the Winston-Salem Journal. That's hard to read. I don't know what they think of it. It doesn't actually come up. There's just one of those. Their site's a pain in the neck. I hate reading reviews anyway. Good night, Bob. Does Chicago still have gangland murders? Sure. Like basically every time you hear about it a killing in Chicago, it's almost certainly drug or gang related. Almost all of them. Maybe I shouldn't say almost all, but a great many. People hear about the stories about Chicago being violent all the time. If you're not involved in drugs or gangs, most of it doesn't really concern you. What's sold out, and I'm not a sellout. Marie, that is exactly right. Goodreads is blocked on my computer. Hey, good luck, Aaron. Thank you for coming, Lucian. Kristen, I have not sold out to Big Pie. I frequent mostly independent pie places. You don't see me up here like saying I can't do superhero work without a hostess pie. Now, who's sold out of the Murder Maps book? Might explain why they can't send me one. But Yeah, I know the supply chain goblins were getting into stuff. Nancy, I plan to do a couple more episodes of Only Minis in the Building. I thought about doing a whole podcast series about the Elias Purcell murder. But I don't know if I want to do another big involved podcast unless I get some kind of backing to it. Oh, Gary, yeah, there's tunnels everywhere in Chicago. And no, the gangsters were not really big on structural engineering. They might have made some use of the tunnels that were already there. They're mostly for garbage and coal. Or in some cases, servants. Thanks, Eric. Enjoy. Teresa, these guys were buried primarily at Mount Olivet. Their spots are not marked. Well, hey, look who's here. Hey, Miles. The famous Miles. And burying gangsters at Mount Carmel became a trend about 3 years after these guys died. Hey, Miles. You can make this a little bit smaller. This one a little smaller too, so it doesn't look weird. Alright. Miles, what are you trying to climb up me for? I mean, yesterday you tried to climb my back. The other day you tried to climb my back. It hurt more than either of the shots I got on Tuesday. Good night, Phoenix. Here, I'm gonna hold you like this. And let everybody see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, look at my double chin. Oh, that's triple. Oh, jeez. Hey, Brad, Inside the Murder Castle is a very, very small book. Susan, I do, yes. I'm not sure how it worked. Like, every time a gangster would be killed, there would be an announcement that they wouldn't, none of the Catholic cemeteries would take them. Then they'd end up at Mount Carmel. Yeah, Eric, the next morning I woke up with just sore shoulders. But then the afternoon it hit me. Well, I kind of slept through it. Back up a little bit there. Now I might be slightly delayed on the morning mini tour on the Find a Grave Friday tomorrow. I probably will start about 5 minutes late because I gotta buy Weird Al tickets. Weird Al is doing another ill-advised vanity tour where he just plays his original songs, not the parodies. But those are his best tours. Thanks, Rodney.
The National Broadcasting Company is presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel.
Miles.
And it is necessary to say, get happy.
And Miles is just demanding all the attention tonight. You got to jump a lot today, Miles. You did lots of jumping. Priya is presently over on the chair. Just biding her time. She doesn't demand playtime quite like he does, but he doesn't demand the squeezy treats. Thank you, Gary. Semper Fi. Joanne, Miles is kind of too big for airplane rides now, like he used to do in the bags. He's too heavy for him now. But he does sometimes still get into the boxes and get like a hovercraft ride. David, Weird Al is somewhere in his 60s, but he doesn't look it. And also, 60 in rock star years, you should look much older. He's always lived a healthy lifestyle. Casey, good luck. I think it was really the flu shot that got me more than the booster shot. You know, Ringo's looking pretty good for his 80s, too. Dylan is 80 and looks it, but he also looked 80 when he was 57. You know, healthy lifestyle only goes so far. Gloria Swanson lived a ridiculously healthy lifestyle. Like, healthy living was her hobby. She lived to be about 80. Whereas my grandfather started smoking and drinking when he was about 12, lived about as unhealthy a lifestyle as you can, and lived to be 89.
And they loved it, they loved it. You could never enjoy being blue until you hear Benny Goodman play the Basin Street Blues. Won't you come along with me down the Mississippi? We'll take a boat to the land of dreams, steam down the river, down to New Orleans.
I don't know if this is usual for me with flu shots. I don't normally get them. But this time I figure if I get the flu, I'll have to get a COVID test. Who needs it? Give me the jab. Susan, yep. You'd think the pickles would preserve her. Rodney, that's what I say too. Miles, you see him climbing me over here? Miles, you gonna climb up me over here? Can you do it over here where they can see better? Miles. There you go. I know, it's your show. Oh, take a look. Say hi to all the nice people. A lot of these people have sent you toys, Miles. Have a good night, Teresa. Alright, you want to do some jumping? I promise you some jumping. So them all, what a great jumper you are. There you go.
I've got a feeling you're fooling.
I know they can all see that. Oh, Miles, did you slip? Hey, Priya. Priya, you're a very good jumper. You should show them. It's about time we started getting out the sled, Miles. Priya's a very good jumper, too. Okay. They're just getting warmed up so far. They can really jump. Well, Priya jumps like almost as high as my head. She doesn't always land that well. Good night, Kristen. It probably is time for me to log off, too. I am still a little bit woozy, partly because I've had enough to drink tonight. As you see. So, quick plug for the upcoming events. Sunday morning, we will follow up this story about the 1910s with stories of the 1920s with the gangs of Chicago. Then, Thursday, we'll be doing Lakeview and Lincoln Park. Coming up here on Mysterious Chicago, Strange Tales of Lakeview and Lincoln Park. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks to everybody who's kicked in a few bucks to help me keep the lights on around here. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I'll see you in the morning for Find a Grave Friday, perhaps a couple of minutes late. So thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours, saying stay safe, stay strong, and of course, if you can, ladies and gentlemen, stay spooky.